Bro. Usyk's own former promoter, the man who guided him to become undisputed world champion at 2 weight classes, just went on camera and said he had Rico winning that fight 7 rounds to 3. Not 5 to 5, not 6 to 4. 7 rounds to 3, and then said Usyk needs to retire immediately, go home to his wife and kids, and never come back. And now Rico Verhoeven has found out about all of it and lost it completely. Stay with me, because by the time we get to what Alex Krassyuk revealed about Usyk's physical decline, and what Rico said when he heard the retirement talks were real, this story hits on a completely different level. Here is where it gets crazy. Alright bro, let me build this properly, because there are details in this story that are not getting enough attention, and they absolutely should be. Saturday night, Pyramids of Giza, Egypt. Glory in Giza. Oleksandr Usyk, undefeated, 25 wins, 2-time undisputed heavyweight champion, beat Anthony Joshua twice, beat Tyson Fury twice, defends his WBC heavyweight title against Rico Verhoeven, a kickboxer, 12 years as undisputed Glory heavyweight champion, 66 wins in that sport, 1 professional boxing match on his record from over a decade ago. The whole world expected Usyk to handle this in 4 or 5 rounds. Most people gave Rico zero chance. Even serious boxing analysts dismissed this as a stay-busy fight before a bigger matchup. And then Rico walked in trained by Peter Fury, Tyson's uncle, with a complete game plan and executed it round after round for 10 straight rounds. 2 judges had the fight dead even after 10 rounds. 1 had Rico ahead. Referee Mark Lyson stopped the fight with 1 second left on the clock in round 11, later admitting to Peter Fury on the flight home that he stopped it because he did not hear the bell.
Boxing's corrupt. Boxing is a disgrace. Boxing is a joke. Oleksandr Usyk was being beaten thoroughly by Rico Verhoeven in only his 2nd ever professional boxing match. You can make excuses if you want for Usyk, but he started to lock in from round 10 onwards, and he hurt Verhoeven really bad at the end of round 11. And the referee, to save boxing, to save face, stopped the fight prematurely. Now, it's Verhoeven's fault for getting hurt. He was irresponsible defensively, but that's corruption. I'm calling it out for what it is. That's boxing trying to save itself from a very, very embarrassing result. And I'll tell you something now, it's not new. It's not new. Rico Verhoeven would end Usyk in 2 minutes in kickboxing in his sport. And it's funny, whenever other fighters from other combat sports step over to boxing, Conor took Floyd 10 rounds and Ngannou arguably beat Tyson Fury. That was arguably a robbery. And now boxing once again has shown its true face. They would never let Verhoeven win. Even if it went the distance, they'd never let that happen. Verhoeven fought really well, leaning on Usyk, staying active. And I have to say, I do think Usyk overlooked Verhoeven. I'm not trying to make excuses for him. He looked terrible tonight. That's his worst ever performance. Flat-footed, gassed out, uncharacteristically. Usually, Usyk does better as the fight builds on. But I'm calling it out for what it is. Blatant corruption. Blatant corruption. You shouldn't sanction these fights if you're worried when the result doesn't go your way. It's a terrible, 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 terrible sport.
But here is the part of this story that is getting buried under the robbery controversy. Usyk's own former promoter, who was watching this fight with his own eyes from outside the current setup, did not just call the stoppage bad. He called the entire performance a warning sign, a sign of decline, a sign that the greatest heavyweight of his generation might already be past the point where continuing is wise. And the specific numbers he put on it are the most damaging thing anyone connected to Usyk has said publicly since the fight ended. Wait for it, because this is where the story goes from a robbery controversy to something much bigger. Alex Krassyuk told Boxing King Media that going into round 11, he only had 3 rounds scored for Usyk. 7 rounds to 3 for Rico Verhoeven. No cap, bro. The man who built Usyk's career scored that fight almost identically to how every fan watching scored it. 7 to 3. And he was sitting there with his own eyes watching it unfold. He said Usyk did not look fresh. He was at the highest weight Krassyuk had ever seen him. And then came the detail that should genuinely worry every Usyk fan. The amount of steps Usyk made in the ring significantly declined compared to previous fights. He was not taking his best advantage of footwork anymore. Instead, more concentrated on landing harder punches with his feet planted into the ground to generate power. Bro, that is not a one-night problem. That is a trend. Krassyuk specifically said he noticed it from the Dubois fight to this fight. A measurable physical decline across 2 consecutive performances. The footwork that made Usyk almost impossible to hit cleanly for years. The movement that bamboozled Joshua, Fury, everyone, is going. And Rico Verhoeven with his high guard and forward pressure exposed exactly that. Then Krassyuk goes even deeper. He talks about the psychological pressure. Says the biggest advantage Rico had going into this fight was mental. Rico had zero pressure because if he lost to the best man on the planet. No shame in that, no damage to his legacy. If Usyk lost, he lost everything. His fame, his legacy, his glory. People remember fighters for their last fight, and that psychological weight was sitting on Usyk's shoulders from the opening bell. Think about that. Usyk walked into that ring carrying the full weight of an unbeaten legacy, while Rico walked in with nothing to lose. And for 10 rounds, the man with nothing to lose was winning. That is not just a bad night. That is a structural problem that does not go away with a training camp. Here is where every voice in the sport piles on, and bro, the consensus is overwhelming.
Krassyuk said if he was there to advise Usyk, his next opponent would be his wife Katerina, his daughter Maria, his daughter Lisa, and his sons. His family matters, maybe his business issues. That is what he has to take care of now. He has to stop. It is better to leave 1 hour before than 2 minutes after. You cannot beat all fighters of the world. From the bottom of his heart, he wishes Usyk to retire at his prime and be remembered as one of the most prominent and greatest fighters of all time. His wife, his daughters, his sons. That is not boxing analysis. That is a former close ally publicly saying, enough. The sport has given you everything. Do not let it take everything back. That level of directness from someone of Krassyuk's standing in the sport is extraordinary, and it is the kind of thing that cannot be unsaid. And he is not alone. Eddie Hearn had Rico up in the fight going into round 11 and called the stoppage poor. Ryan Garcia said he believes the round had ended. Peter Fury called the stoppage premature, while acknowledging Rico was fatigued. Don Charles described watching the fight as a nightmare unfolding in real time. Spencer Oliver said Usyk will be missed when he retires. When, not if. Frank Warren got emotional discussing the possibility. And now, here is where Rico enters the conversation. Because while all of these professional voices are building the retirement case around Usyk, Rico Verhoeven, who filed an official appeal on his way to the airport, with the 5 words that broke the boxing internet, is losing it. Not because Usyk had a bad night, not because Usyk looked tired, but because the retirement talk means something specific and devastating for Rico that nobody is saying out loud directly. If Usyk retires, Rico never gets his rematch. No cap, that is the most uncomfortable truth in this entire story. And Rico knows it. And that is exactly why he is going off. Here is the twist that ties everything together. And this is the detail that reframes the entire retirement conversation. Usyk turns 40 in January, and he said before the Verhoeven fight that he had 2 more ring walks left. 2. Meaning his plan was Rico, then Caballero, then done. And the queue forming around him, Verhoeven seeking a rematch, Caballero pressing his mandatory claim, Sanchez position through the IBF, gives him options. But whether those options include Rico is the question that is destroying Rico right now. Here is where it gets crazy. Because Usyk himself said before this fight he would fight until he is 41. 2 more ring walks. Caballero and then 1 more. The rematch with Rico is not even in that plan. Rico is not in Usyk's final 2 fights. The man who arguably beat Usyk for 10 rounds at the Pyramids of Giza is not even in the champion's retirement schedule. Think about that. Rico files the appeal. Post rules only matter if applied when it matters most. Demands the rematch. And finds out that not only is Usyk potentially retiring, but even if he does not retire, the rematch Rico earned and deserves is not even in the plan. Caballero is mandatory. Frank Warren confirmed it publicly. Usyk either fights Caballero or vacates the WBC title. There is no space in a 2-fight retirement plan for Rico Verhoeven. And Krassyuk is not even recommending that Usyk does those 2 fights. He is saying stop now. Retire now. Before Caballero. Before anything. Which means the absolute best case scenario for Rico is that Usyk ignores Krassyuk, beats Caballero, and then gives Rico the rematch as his final fight. And the worst case, which is looking increasingly likely, is that Usyk follows the advice of the people closest to him and walks away before Rico ever gets his shot. Stay with me because this is the part that really stings. Krassyuk also pointed out that Usyk is kissed by the gods, the luckiest boxer who ever existed, but said that luck is not given for nothing. It comes from hard work, from diligence, from the size of his heart, and what he leaves in training camp. And even with all of that, on Saturday night in Egypt, none of it was enough to clearly beat a kickboxer in his second boxing match. That sentence alone should tell you everything about where Usyk is in his career right now. Alright bro, here is where I actually land on all of this, and I want you to genuinely argue with me in the comments because this is the most layered story in boxing right now.
Krassyuk had it 7-3 for Rico. 7-3. The man who knows Usyk better than almost anyone alive scored that fight almost identically to how every single fan watching scored it. And then said, retire. Rico losing it about all of this is completely understandable. Here is what it looks like from his side. He trains for 6 months, loses his mother during training camp, flies to Egypt, outboxes the best heavyweight alive for 10 rounds, gets stopped with 1 second on the clock because the referee could not hear a bell, files an official appeal on his way to the airport, posts 5 words that the whole world agrees with, and then finds out that the man who beat him is being publicly urged to retire by his own former promoter, who scored the fight 7-3 in Rico's favor, without ever giving Rico the chance to do it again properly. Rules only matter if they are applied when it matters most. Rico said it. That is not just a robbery. That is a robbery with a timer on it. And every day that retirement conversation gets louder is another day Rico's window gets smaller. Drop your take in the comments. Does Rico get his rematch, or does Usyk retire and leave this story unfinished forever?